of the University Extension Beef Genetics webinar series. Our presenter tonight is Troy Sulzer, and he is an extension educator up in St. Louis County. And he is going to be talking about evaluating the use of artificial insemination versus bull breeding for your operation. So if you want to go ahead and click to the next slide, please, Troy. And before we get started, we just want to let everyone on Zoom tonight, as well as our attendees who are going to be watching through Facebook Live, know that we appreciate your questions and we look forward to engaging with you throughout tonight's presentation. And forgot to ask Brenda, do we have a poll question? Yep, we just want to get a really quick, just ask you guys quick, where are you joining us from tonight? Got a poll question that pops up on your screen, and then also just to kind of help us gauge a little bit about just a kind of number of years in the industry. How long have you been in the beef industry? And while we're filling that out, Troy, sorry, could you go back one more slide? And I'm just going to walk through on how we can do some of that engaging with the audience and how you can provide some feedback. So if you want to provide feedback tonight, like I said, we want to keep this as engaging and interactive as we possibly can. There's a couple different ways to do that. The first is that if you, just to keep the background noise down to a minimum, everybody is automatically muted. So if you would like to speak, and of course, Troy welcomes your questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. If you just hover, if you're on your on a computer screen, just hover down towards the bottom left-hand corner of your screen and click your unmute button, and then you can speak. Otherwise, a nifty little trick that the kids taught me, if you have a keyboard, just push your space bar, and when you push your space bar in, you're unmuted. When you take your finger off your space bar, you go back to being muted. Otherwise, we certainly encourage you to reach out through the chat box that is down on the bottom part of your screen, and you can type your message in. Just know that it automatically goes to everyone. If you would like to send your questions directly to myself, Melissa, or you can send them to Stacy or Dana as well. And towards the end, we will compile all those questions and ask them to our presenter. Also, our Facebook Live people can certainly just put them in the comment section, and we will be monitoring that through Facebook, and we will ask those questions to Troy as well. So thank you, Troy. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So I want to take a quick second here to introduce our University of Minnesota Extension Beef team. We have Dana Adams. She is the Extension educator out of Stearns, Benton, and Morrison counties. Karen Johnson is our Extension educator out of McLeod, Meeker, and Wright counties. Dr. Joe Armstrong, DVM, is our Cattle Production Systems Extension Educator.
It disappeared off my screen of devices, like there was no
Extension BQA Program Associate. Heather Default is our Extension Educator out of Polk and Norman counties. Brenda Miller is our Extension Educator out of Todd County. Dr. Eric Mosel is our Cow-Calf Management Extension Educator. My name is Melissa Runk. I'm located down here in Pipestone and Murray counties. Our presenter is Troy Sulzer out of St. Louis County, and we also have Tara Young. She's the Hubbard County Extension Educator. So, all right. So yeah, we've already launched the first poll. I'll just take a quick second I'd like to introduce our presenter for tonight. Troy Sulzer is a local extension educator for St. Louis County in Northeast Minnesota. He grew up in Barnum, Minnesota, where he was raised on a commercial beef and forage operation. Troy received both his BS and MS degrees in animal science and animal nutrition from the University of Minnesota. Troy's cattle operation up in Northeast Minnesota are managed in a multi-paddock system where they graze on native pastures, improved perennial pastures, field corn, and cover crops. They also direct market beef, pork, and vegetables. Troy is very interested in research and is currently involved in a reestablishment of winter feeding areas study with the University of Minnesota Beef Team. With that, Troy, I will turn it over to you.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Melissa, for that kind introduction. Before we get started, I want to make sure, is the volume appropriate for everyone? Can you hear well? Excellent, thank you. So tonight, I've been asked to discuss the aspects of utilizing and comparing the aspects of AI versus bull breeding. And over the years, in my own case, I learned how to AI breed when I was 12 and found it to be an aspect that was very educational for me, and also gave me a way in which to introduce and interact with beef producers for many, many years. My grandfather specifically started AI breeding when they still used fresh semen, unfrozen. And he really instilled in us many aspects of why it is important and the components related to that. So related to the use of the technology, by no means is it new technology. And in the dairy industry, at least 66% of all of the cows are bred AI, 85% in the registered Holstein Association are bred AI. And in the beef industry, we only see about 7.6%. One thing that was very intriguing to me is that we do have people that utilize synchronization without AI breeding in some cases, just to cattle cycle earlier in that period, that first 21-day period. And I think that it's intriguing that we'd go ahead and do that, but not take it to completion by going ahead and AI breeding those animals from that standpoint. So as we look at bulls with all of the catalogs, as Melissa shared during the last presentation, I have to admit that having a good battery of bulls is very interesting to me, great to look at, to see their overall scale, structural components, and also the excitement of selecting a bull that works for you in your operation. Now, with the catalogs, we don't have that luxury other than seeing the photos. But with that in mind, it really does give you a lot more to choose from and select from. So when I look at considerations for AI breeding, I think about many of the pros. Melissa talked a lot about EPDs, and when we get into selecting bulls from some of the bull studs especially, we get the opportunity to define and evaluate bulls that have tremendous number of offspring, increasing their accuracy from maybe 20 to 30% up to as high as even 90, 95% in relationship to some of the EPDs associated with things like calving ease direct, calving ease maternal, and also some of the carcass components that allow you to do a much better job selecting bulls that will enhance, increase, and improve the animals that you have on your operation. I also appreciate the aspects of the flexibility that AI gives you in relationship to developing a crossbreeding system, selecting animals to fit that, to create complexes or a breed combination that will give you the ultimate in relationship to performance and also heterosis in regards to their production traits. It gives you a chance to increase performance on things like average daily gain, feed to gain, days on feed. Also the improvement in carcass evaluation with them having much more accurate EPDs related to that. It's being a very, very valuable component. Improve reproduction, especially in relationship to heterosis. It may give you the opportunity to reduce the number of bulls that you need to keep and maintain by giving those cows the opportunity to breed by AI. When we use synchronization programs, we can set them up so that we get more of them breeding on day one. But in addition to that, we can also have more of those calves earlier within that 21 day period, based on the aspects of that that synchronization program actually stimulating and increasing the non-breeders during that period. And then we may be able to even extend the use of the bulls that we do have on hand by allowing us to avoid inbreeding with using the AI technology. Some of the cons that I am often met with when discussing this with farmers are the increased labor requirements, some of the facilities that may or may not be available, especially if we have pastures away from home and we're trying to breed on pasture. And so that is something that we need to work around. And there are some options out there to address that as far as portable systems and such. And then in many cases, especially depending on operations that are mixed operations with crop and livestock, we sometimes run into workload issues, especially during summertime if that is the time you're breeding, or if it's earlier than that, it may be even in direct conflict with planting. And so that's something that we have to continue to watch. Now, when we look at the breeding method for cattle, this chart really depicts some of the earlier comments that I made in relationship to a majority of the animals being bred by bulls. But in addition to that, as we look across, of course, probably the group that is easiest to group and work with is the heifers specifically. And so as we look across the pink bar, I believe it's pink, would depict the heifers. And we can see that about 20% in total, whether they are purchased and or bred on farm, they do implement the technology of AI. So this here is a prime example of why my grandfather felt it was really important on his dairy operation to implement AI as early as possible, because he said he had never had any of his friends or neighbors get killed by a straw of semen. So now we can evaluate for temperament, but we never know exactly when that bull might change his mind about working with you in a corral or whatever. So with that in mind, that is something that I always warn people about, no matter what, never trust a bull. But it is something that we should also consider as we select whether or not we should implement AI. So over the years, especially this year, as we've heard reports of bull sales being higher and higher, it's not uncommon to have $4,000 to $5,000 bulls on average. And in some cases, we've even got $10,000 bulls going out to commercial operations. Some work done at Cal Poly would suggest that on the research that they did there, that bull only siring on average of about 18.9 calves per year. Now keep this number in mind as we'll do some calculations later based upon this. And in some cases, we saw that data represent anywhere from 0 calves per bull up to 64, depending on the operation. And about 4.4% of the sires never actually sired any calves. And in some cases, it might be libido. In other cases, it is just that the bulls were never tested and actually were infertile. And so this is a plug that I will put in that BSE exams are essential in relationship to your bull battery every year. Additionally, as we look at a chart related to the bull price and the cost on a per calf sired basis, on the top we can see that The prices that are depicted in this calculation range in price from $3,000 to $10,000. And if we look at that center column of $5,000 bulls at purchase, we have approximately a $2,100 value for maintenance per year. For the 3 years, risk of loss due to accidental death or what have you of about 660. We have the salvage value subtracted off of that for a total cost for the 3 years of about $6,100. That is, if we divide that by 3, it's an annual cost of about just over $2,000. And if we take that $1,053 divided by that 18.9 live calves per bull, that cost of pregnancy just caused by that bull of $5,000 would be approximately $90.59. Now, at first glance, myself included, that is a very large number. And I think it's really critical to point that out because in most operations, even though it hurts to write that check of $5,000 per bull when we go to a bull sale, we don't often attribute it back to the cost per calf born alive, or that cost being part of the total cost associated with producing that calf. My colleague, Dr. Mosel, often points out that in most of our Minnesota operations, our annual cow carrying cost is well over $750 to $800 per cow. This being just one of those components that is often forgot in that calculation. So when we look at herds in Minnesota, I think it's really important to point out that the average herd is about 23 head. And this would beg the question, do we use one bull or do we use two? 18.9, we should be able to get by with one, but then what happens if he goes lame? Is there a backup plan? I think it's really critical to think about these things well in advance as you get into your breeding season. Another thing is, do you purchase a calving ease bull for use for servicing all your animals? Or do you have one that is calving ease for just the heifers and have a more moderate birth calving ease direct compared to the bull that you would utilize just for breeding your heifers? With this in mind, you really do give up a lot of performance in all of your calves if you select for calving ease across the board. And in some cases, if you don't watch your calving ease maternal EPD, you may actually be breeding for less calving ease capacity in your future generations based upon this. Another question is, what can you afford to spend on each bull based upon the efficiency of your use in your operation? This is one of those places where having larger number of cows to be servicing or being serviced by the bulls can really play into your favor, allowing those 2 and 3 and older bulls to service more cows along those lines. And then when you're done looking at these questions, I think it's important to think about, does AI fit into your breeding program to get those cows settled? Some of the costs associated with artificial insemination, generally CEDARs are about $1,250 if you decide to use a CEDAR in your synchronization program. The progesterone, the prostaglandin and gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH, will cost you approximately $7.50. Semen on average is about $25. The technician fee for AI breeding, if you can't do that yourself, is about 15, and additional labor on average would be about $6 per head in relationship to that, for a total cost of about $66 per head for doing that synchronization and one-time AI breeding. In this particular table, it represents information related to the cost of getting those animals bred, and also looks at an additional value associated with bulls if you're trying to compare apples to apples. Dr. John Hall, in this particular example, demonstrates with a bull only with $4,000 bulls with a pregnancy rate of about 90%, it would calculate out to be about $75 per pregnant animal in that particular situation. With the use of time AI breeding and use of those bulls to do the cleanup, that pregnancy rate actually in this calculation, based on former data that he had collected, actually increases to about 95% due to the aspects of having the means within the synchronization program to increase or stimulate some of those non-cycling animals to actually, even with that additional 95% or 5% increase in pregnancy rate, we still saw a slight increase of about $10 per head based upon that additional AI cost. Now, if we want to try and compare the quality of the bulls from the AI versus just the bull that we utilize for the main breeding, and we increase that value from 4,000 to 5,000 and use him to breed the entire group, and we get a 90% conception rate, we actually have a cost per pregnancy of about $91.26. But if we were to maintain the $4,000 bull plus use the synchronization, it also equals, with the additional pregnancy rate, about $91. So with that in mind, we can improve the genetics while still having approximately the same cost overall per cow or per pregnancy with the use of that fixed time AI. In some work done here at the University of Minnesota with Rogers and others, we looked at the aspects of how does that fixed time AI and moving a higher percentage of those calves to earlier in that calving cycle, we found that there was approximately a 38-pound increase related to weaning rate as well as the weight per calf. In this particular study, it demonstrated 38. In other studies, that number actually increases as high as about 70 pounds per calf. But overall, I would say the average looked to be approximately 50 additional pounds by utilizing the timed AI to get those calves born earlier in that calving period. In addition to that, Stefan in 2007 reported a very interesting study where they looked at not only the single use of AI, but also broke groups into sire AI as well as a dam influenced AI versus other combinations of that, getting all the way back to the sire non-AI and dam non-AI. And as you look down that list, you can see that the weight benefit when you look at the aspects of both the sire and dam being influenced by AI versus no AI influence is approximately 100 pounds. In addition to that, we can see that the age would be depicted in this particular example, that by doing the AI, we have about 30 extra days of age. And we're seeing those calves gain at just about an extra 1/10 of a pound per head per day in relationship to that. In other information that they collected, you can see that overall, the animals that were harvested on a live basis were significantly heavier. Their days on feed were less, and looking at the average daily gain while they were in the feedlot was also about 1/10 of a pound more per day. Now, those of you that are retaining ownership all the way through to finish, those things are very, very critical. And any of you that are interested in purchasing calves to put in the feedlot, those components are also equally as important. So now that I hope I have been able to demonstrate to you the value of doing the synchronization and AIing, at least utilizing it as a way in which to consider just maintaining one less bull perhaps, or looking at ways in which to improve your genetics. One tool that I really have grown to appreciate and utilize on a regular basis with farmers, and if you're interested, I'm more than happy to run this model or spreadsheet with you if you'd like. Or you can actually go to the Iowa Beef Center there at that address at the bottom of the page. And this particular spreadsheet will go through and help you in laying out potential protocols to use on heifers, which in most cases is different than ones recommended for cows. You can use either fixed time AI, or you can use observed heat detection. Both are very good options, and depending on what your time options are and where the animals are housed, oftentimes will depict whether or not you're going to use any heat detection. And with it, it will also generate a calendar, and that calendar tells you exactly when to put the CIDRs in, for example, when to give a GnRH shot, when to pull the CIDRs, when to give the lute shot, all of those sort of things, so that it's nearly foolproof. And I think that's really critical, especially as you're doing this for the first time, if you've never had any experience, because then you know when and what time you should be doing it, so that you get the animals correctly set up for your timed AI purpose. The other thing that I think is really important to point out is that, generally speaking, the duration from when you give that shot until you breed is different for heifers and cows, and that will be laid out for you in this particular program. In addition to that, you can put your own costs in there, and it'll help you break down the costs and do it similarly to what you saw me cover earlier in this presentation in regards to how much it costs you per head, and then how much it will be or cost you per live calf based on different pregnancy percentages. That really should help you in determining what might work well for you. In addition to that, there are two other, one is an app, the AI calculator from Xeodus. Dr. Cliff Lamb helped put this together. down in Florida in relationship to utilizing these tools for synchronization. And then another one that I have utilized is actually from University of Nebraska, where you can go through and get very, very specific in regards to your costs, and it will calculate those items very similar to a spreadsheet that would help track all of your expenses for your cow herd. So with that, in summary, breeding costs are much more expensive than expected in most cases when you talk to beef producers across the state. AI is a very viable option for consideration in your operation, and hopefully you'll think about or at least evaluate some of the bulls that are available through some of the bull studs and compare those in relationship to not only the EPDs, but also the accuracy of those EPDs when you're making those comparisons. AI can increase your cattle performance in all aspects, not only the calf weight, if you're selling calves at weaning or after backgrounding, but also taking them further on through the feedlot if you want to retain ownership on them and capture additional value from those components. And then there are several tools out there that I offered that you might be able to utilize, or I can help you in utilizing, so that you can put a good and successful plan together in relationship to such implementation. So with that, this is the contact information for myself. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have in regards to this particular topic.
If anybody has any questions at this time, thank you so much, Troy, for that wonderful presentation. Please put them in the chat box. Okay, first question is, are there any classes to learn how to AI?
So Melissa or Joe, if you could help us fill in relationship to some of those aspects. I know that you guys hosted one recently. Another thing that people can do is reach out to their local bull studs and check with them to see if they've got any classes coming up. But
thank you, Troy. Yes, I'll chime in there, but yes, Dr. Joe and I hosted one down in Pipestone County this last December, and the dairy is willing to have us back again. And so we're planning on, the SDSU is gonna jump in and help with that again. It would be the first weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in December in 2022.
Yeah, that's it's a big it's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of numbers that you need to get as far as just having your arm in cows for learning how to AI. There's a lot of pieces to it, so I do recommend taking a class. The other place to check is your semen dealer. Sometimes they're willing to help with that, especially if you have a lot of cows. The other part of that question I saw was learning how to preg check. I don't think there's anyone that's going to teach preg checking, especially in the state of Minnesota right now. The way the law is written is that preg checking is still considered a diagnosis. So to preg check, because it's considered a diagnosis, it's supposed to be done by a licensed veterinarian. That doesn't always happen, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me if people know how to preg check, but the odds of you finding someone who's willing to teach you, especially a veterinarian, would be pretty slim.
Joe, would you be willing to discuss the aspects of blood pregnancy testing process, or if folks don't have access to a veterinarian, is that an option for them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Blood pregnancy testing is definitely an option, especially when people don't have access to a veterinarian. It's certainly better than not pregnancy checking. The way that test works, though, is that it's skewed one way, right? So it's skewed towards wanting to call pregnant. So it's more likely to call a open animal pregnant than it is a pregnant animal open, because that's the better way the test should be done. So a lot of times it'll come up as there'll be borderline test numbers. So I think that the blood test is really good, but I like to, especially if you're not going to have a veterinarian come out and test the ones that are borderline, then you should probably do it. You'll have a smaller population that you might have to test again, just to make sure that they are pregnant or they are open. So I think that that's the best way to do it in my mind, is to check once early. You'll have some inconclusives, and then you should check again on anything that's on the edge a little bit later.
What makes them questionable, Joe?
It depends. Sometimes they're a little early. The pregnancy is too early to detect, or there hasn't been a big enough change in the hormones that we're looking for. Sometimes the fetus is no longer viable, but the animal is still producing hormones that say it's pregnant. So those are some of the things that make it, inconclusive or on the edge. I think a lot of people have moved to doing some blood testing and then having a vet come in and only preg check a small number of animals, which is another way to do it if that's something that you can do. I know plenty of veterinarians that are willing to teach people how to draw blood. That's something that's a good skill to have. There's a lot of producers that know how to do it. So if it's something you want to learn how to do, there's probably a neighbor that knows how to do it, or someone close that you can ask to teach you as well. So much less complicated than learning how to preg check with your arm, because that takes hundreds, if not thousands, of cows to be reliable.
All right, Troy, I got another one here. Going into next summer breeding season, we have only one replacement heifer. She is sired by the current herd bull. The herd is less than 10 cows on average. This summer is the third season with the current herd bull. Is it okay to do a terminal breeding in this case? What do you recommend?
So ideally, that would not be the recommendation, even though you would be planning for that animal to be terminal. There is some risk that when line breeding or inbreeding, as it is termed, you in essence are enhancing the good and enhancing the bad at the same time. And so there are some particular genes that may express themselves as you continue to line or inbreed. I use those terms synonymously purposefully because in the dairy industry specifically, they do line breeding on a regular basis. It's much less common in the beef industry. And the reasons are, as I stated before, there's a higher risk of things you don't want to showing up in that process. Other thoughts from the rest of the team?
Yeah, I agree with Troy. It increases the chances of genetic mishaps, I'll call it, and that includes early in pregnancy too. So I mean that can cause some maybe not abortions, but maybe fetal resorptions or issues on that end. So I think it can affect your pregnancy rate at some point too. the chances are relatively small, but it's not worth the chance. So even if it's terminal, you might see some issues that are going to affect your bottom line.
I've got another question here, Troy. Got a yearling bull with 40 cows and 5 heifers. I'm thinking of using AI on half and bull breed the rest. Or do you think it'd be better to AI all and then use that bull for cleanup? I'd probably catch natural heat cycles and we calve over 60 days.
So related to that, my recommendation would be to go ahead and utilize a synchronization program on all of them and AI breed all of them and allow the bull then to just pick up the rest in relationship to that. That would be my recommendation. Now, if you, well, you would have to be in all in one pasture. So that is way too many animals for a yearling bull to be covering, even if it's just half. I would definitely recommend going with a much higher degree of AI breeding.
Thank you. I've got another question. How far into the pregnancy is it the best time for blood testing for preg checking?
So I would say the best time, and this gets a little tricky with the beef side. So on the dairy side, where we have cows that are pregnant constantly, right? So we can really time it perfectly and try to get a couple different tests in. On the beef side, it's almost the same rules in my mind as if you're going to use your arm. So if you're going to use your arm and you're only going to use your arm, no ultrasound, really you want your shortest bred cow to be at least 30 days pregnant. And the same rules apply for blood testing. You need those animals to be far enough along that you're sure that blood test is going to work. So they have to be at least 30 days pregnant. So 30 days after the bull comes out or 30 days after AI, if you want to do it that way and do 2 tests. I see a lot of people do that, 30 days after AI, you blood test, and then you have a fair assumption of who's AI bred and who's going to be bull bred from there. But you could have some borderline animals, but you have a fair assumption. But you want at least 30 days pregnant to blood test. If you have a 60-day or a 90-day breeding window, that means you're going to have some that are out at 120 days, which is fine. And then, you can consider rechecking them if you do it early enough, just to make sure. And then it gives you time to, if you start early with the blood test, that gives you time to bring them back in before you've already made it through all of winter and fed them the whole winter anyway. So that's my opinion on that. The previous question, I really want to emphasize what Troy said. A yearling bull with 45 animals is way too many animals for that yearling bull. The yearling bull, I'm counting on him doing maybe 10 to 12, 15 at the most if he's a long yearling. So you either got to be excellent with your AI and not count on that yearling bull, or have another bull, because I think that's really asking a lot of him. And if you expect too much of him, you're just setting him up for failure. You won't be happy with him, even though it's not his fault.
Joe, a couple of things that you mentioned that I would like to further comment on. In that situation with that many cows, especially if that bull is out on pasture, it's really critical to have another one in that pasture. If you turn those cows out after AIing, it's a different story if he is locked up in a smaller pen, or the cows are locked up so that he can find all of those girls to breed. But if he's being turned out, they tend to fall in love as yearlings and tend not to pay attention to the other ladies as they should. So, and then the practicality of blood testing cows multiple times when they're beef cows is not very likely. So is it okay to wait until they're 5, 6, 7 months along and do it once at that point? And then also, I think it's critical to point out the value of either sleeving or using ultrasound to give you a little bit better prediction, excuse me.
Yeah, it's definitely viable. You know, I'm a big fan of early preg check, no matter the method, because I want my opens gone. I mean, there's no reason to keep them around if they're not going to be productive. And if I am going to keep them around, I want to change their job, right? They've switched careers all of a sudden, and I need to feed them differently. They got to put weight on, and then I can focus on that. But yeah, if you're looking at doing it once and making sure, I wouldn't wait too long, because again, the whole point is to get rid of your opens so you don't feed your non-productive cows. But yeah, if you want to wait until your shortest bred cow is, already 60 days or 90 days along, that's fine too. But yeah, you don't want to wait too long, because the longer you wait, just like if you're going to use your arm or an ultrasound, the longer you wait, the more you're paying for those non-productive cows, or cows that don't fit your calving window that fit someone else's. You can let someone else feed those. Yeah, the benefit of an arm, or especially an ultrasound, is I can give you a lot more information. The test can be wrong. The gold standard is still an ultrasound, and I can give you a lot of information. If they're at the right stage and length, I can give you sex, male, female. I can tell you about twins. I can look at that. I can actually look at the heart rate and make sure that fetus is viable. Whereas if that fetus is dead, like I said, it'll still call it pregnant, and it'll actually call it pregnant for quite a while. We've done some, they're not studies. They're just little tiny experiments. When I was in practice, we would find animals that were on their last chance for breeding on the dairies. And we would find fetuses that were no longer viable, and we just leave them alone because we knew we weren't going to breed that animal anymore. And then the clinic, we would just pay for the blood tests, and we'd see how long is this animal going to keep coming up pregnant, even though I know that fetus is not viable anymore. And sometimes it would stretch out 2, 3 months, 4 months before that animal would come open again on the blood test. So that's some of the benefit of having the ultrasound or having an arm there. We can, especially the ultrasound, I can tell you twins, I can tell you sex if they're the right length and gestation, and then I can check actual viability of the fetus.
Got another couple questions on this. You guys talk a little bit about how long after AI would you turn the bull in, especially like after a fixed AI program?
So related to that, the general recommendation is waiting at least 2 days in relationship to that. Some do wait 3 days, depending on the circumstance. But part of that is because some of those cows, especially in a fixed time AI scenario, you will have viability of that semen in that cow's uterus for a period of time after you've actually bred her. And by exposing her to a bull, you're putting a lot more potential, especially due to the amount of semen that he will deposit in her at that point, versus you just depositing merely either a quarter or a half cc of semen. So with that in mind, it's advised to keep the bulls out for a period of time, usually about 2 to 3 days before you turn that bull in for him to take over.
Next question, does a 14-day feed treatment and then 1 shot of GnRH sync program work as well as a full shot sync program?
So my impression is that is an MGA luteolase program. And so with that in mind, specifically, if you have enough, there is good data to suggest that program works extremely well, even at a higher percentage rate than a cedar in combination, depending on how you set that up. But and I apologize for the complexity of this answer, but there's a lot of things that go into it. So please don't take that. So with a 14-day MGA followed by a LUT and tamed AI at 48 to 54 hours after that Lutalet shot, the conception rates can be extremely high. The important component of getting that to be implemented right is that you have equal access to feed, and every heifer in that group gets that appropriate amount of MGA every single day. If you can't successfully feed every animal appropriately, you can have a bust in regards to that program. And then I would advise you to utilize other programs such as the one that you are describing. There are several new programs or protocols being developed, including a CEDAR similarly to how you've described using the MGA. And I think there's a lot of data that would support that as potentially being one that could be very, very successful in your heifers. In your cows, that's a whole different situation. As you do this, make sure that you have good communication with your veterinarian in relationship to setting up and utilizing your CEDARs, your GnRH, and your Lutalyse in that process to be successful and appropriate to your patient-client relationship with your veterinarian.
Yeah, the big thing with the MGA, like Troy said, is that the 2 feet per head of bunk space, because everybody's got to be able to eat. And definitely, I know the question said GnRH, but LUT is important to that protocol. The big thing when I talk about protocols is that the best protocol and the one that's going to give the most success is the one that you can follow to a T the best. So it doesn't matter if someone uses a 7-day co-sync or a 7-7 co-sync or a 5-day CEDAR sync. If you get the timing right on the shots, then it doesn't matter. So you can use a super complex protocol and have great success. We talk about this on the dairy side as well. I can use a double OVSync protocol and see pregnancy rates that are through the roof. But if I don't get those shots right, there's no reason to use it. So a lot of times when I see this 14-day MGA with a LUT, it's because we don't have the ability to run them through the chute multiple times. So that might be the best protocol that gives you the best results. It's just always about your system. So the best protocol is the one that you can follow to a T the most. And it doesn't really matter which one it is. There's some that are better than others if everything else is equal, right? If you can get all the trips through the chute and the shots perfect, I think there's some protocols that are better than others. But it all comes down to your logistics and what you do on your farm. So
the other component that we haven't addressed, and I think it's equally as important to the synchronization program, and that is your animals need to be in the right body condition. They need to have the right nutrition in advance. And that doesn't start at time of calving. That is long before that. Having cows in 5, 5.5, 6 body condition scores coming into calving so that they don't or still have adequate fat reserves after they are ready to be bred is equally as important as any protocol in relationship to that. The other thing that I think is really critical, if you talk to any AI technician that has had a fair amount of experience, we don't want our cows obesely fat coming into calving and losing weight. It's much easier to get cows bred when they are on a positive plane of nutrition, gaining weight at time of breeding as compared to losing weight at time of breeding.
Thank you. We got another question. When is the best time to ultrasound?
So the best time to ultrasound for me is early again. So I can pick up a pregnancy with ultrasound down to 28 days. So the shortest pregnancy in the group should be at about 30 days. That's when I like to ultrasound. I'm a little selfish. That means usually with the spring calving herd, it's still warm out when I'm preg checking. So I like that aspect of it as well. But what it does is it gets rid of your open cows early. And if you have good nutrition program like Troy was just talking about, and you get your cows pregnant on time, it means that even if my shortest bred cow is at 30 days and I have a 90-day window, almost all of my calves are going to be in that 60 to 90-day window when they're all those animals are going to be 60 to 90 days pregnant, which means I can then give you all that extra information I was talking about, which is sex and twins or not, and all those other things.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box, so
I think, Melissa, they all want to go to bed, so that's okay with me.
well, you already answered them all in your presentation, Troy. Yes, I've not seen any more questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dana to do the final wrap up.
Sure. So once again, thank you for attending the UMN Extension Beef Genetics webinar on breeding costs, AI versus bulls. This presentation has been recorded and shared on the UMN St. Louis County Facebook page. And also at the end of the program, everyone who's registered online will get the links to these recordings so that they can access all this information in the future. So we have one final evaluation before you guys tuck yourselves in that Brenda's gonna launch for us. And we do this because we want to know whether or not the information that we gave you was useful to you. So just a reminder about next week. It'll be on Monday, 8 to 9 again, and it'll be on heifer rearing costs versus buying. So before Troy shared his contact information, and I'm sure that if you weren't able to grab that, just shoot us a message in the chat and we can circulate that again. But I think I can speak for him that he's more than willing to help anyone with questions that they may have. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday, 8 till 9 p.m.
Joe and Troy, we've got one more question that came up. Can you detect sex as early as 60 days bred with ultrasound?
Yeah. So the big thing is that we need them to be at least 55 days. There's some at 55 days pregnant that just get a little tricky to see with the ultrasound. Sometimes what I'm looking for is kind of halfway in between where it tells me what my decision is. So yes, I can see it between 55 and about 90 days. Sometimes the calves at 90 days are too big to get up in the pelvis and see with the ultrasound appropriately and see what I need to see. But yeah, about 55 to 75 days is the perfect window. We can stretch that up to 90 in most cases, depending on how many you have to do. If I have to do 500 of those, I'm not getting them all done. I'll be totally honest with you. My arm will be dead trying to get, a bunch of 90-day calves up in the pelvis like that, because it's a lot of work.
Thank you.